I was walking down the street, the sounds of the city buzzing around me, but my mind was far from here. A memory had surfaced in my mind, one that I hadn't thought about in years. It was the day my mother passed away, the day my world changed. I stopped for a moment, leaning against a lamppost, trying to gather my thoughts. The city moved around me, but I felt frozen in place, stuck in the past. I was only 12 years old when she died. My mother was everything to me. She was kind, loving, and always put others before herself. I never truly understood how fragile life was until that moment. Losing her at such a young age was something I couldn't have prepared for. After the funeral, I was left to pick up the pieces of my life. I moved in with my grandparents, who were kind but strict. They gave me a roof over my head, food on the table, and their love. But I knew deep down that things would never be the same. The most difficult part was my stepfather, John. He wasn't abusive, but I never felt close to him. After my mother's death, he changed. It was like I was just a part of his life he had to tolerate, not someone he cared about. I remember the way he started spending more time away from home, talking to his new girlfriend, and ignoring me when I needed him the most. I had always looked up to my mother's strength, but now, without her, I was forced to deal with everything on my own. As the years went by, my relationship with John grew colder. He started dating a younger woman named Rachel, and the tension in our house became unbearable. Rachel wasn't just younger, she was loud, brash, and didn't seem to care about me or my feelings. I could see what was happening, but I didn't know how to stop it. My mother's memory, her spirit, seemed to be slipping away with every passing day. The day came when I decided to leave. It wasn't a dramatic departure, but it was one that I knew was necessary. I had turned 18, and I was old enough to make my own decisions. I packed my bags, said a quiet goodbye to my grandparents, and left. The first few weeks were hard. I had nowhere to go, no money, and no support. But I was determined. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of the city and worked 2 jobs just to get by. Life wasn't easy, but I was starting to build something for myself. During that time, I decided to finish my education. I enrolled in the local high school to complete my GED, and within a year, I graduated. I wanted to be someone who made a difference in the world. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive. I took a deep breath and thought about my future. I knew I wanted to study law. It was something that had always interested me, and I felt that it was my way of fighting back against all the injustices I had faced in my life. One day, while I was working at a coffee shop, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. His name was Peter, and we had been classmates in elementary school. He was the kind of person who would always make you laugh, someone who had a kind heart. I was surprised to see him, and even more so when he told me he was studying law at the same university I had applied to. We talked for a while, catching up on life. He mentioned that he had heard about my mother's death and how my stepfather had caused some trouble after I left. He didn't go into details, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. My stepfather had always been a man of secrets, and I had a nagging feeling that he had been hiding something important. I didn't trust him, and I couldn't shake the thought that he had been involved in something illegal. But what? Tax evasion? Money laundering? The possibilities were endless, but I didn't have any proof. At least, not yet. As the months went by, I threw myself into my studies. I worked tirelessly to pass my exams and get into a law school that would help me achieve my dream. I was determined to prove to myself that I could do something with my life, that I could become more than just a victim of my circumstances. Peter and I kept in touch, but I noticed that he had become distant. Something had changed between us, and I didn't know what it was. But I didn't have time to worry about it. Then, one fateful afternoon, I received a call from my grandmother. She was in tears, telling me that John had been involved in a serious accident. I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, I found my stepfather lying in a bed, bruised and unconscious. The doctors told me he had been in a car accident, but they didn't explain much more than that. I felt a wave of cold wash over me. It was too much of a coincidence. I had a bad feeling that something was wrong. After he recovered, John became reclusive. He rarely left the house, and when he did, he was always looking over his shoulder. He stopped talking to me, stopped pretending like everything was normal. It wasn't long before the rumors started. People whispered that John had been involved in shady dealings, that he had done something illegal. But what? I still didn't know. My suspicions grew stronger as time went on. One evening, as I was walking back to my apartment, I ran into Peter again. This time his face was pale, and he seemed to be avoiding eye contact. He asked if I had heard anything about my stepfather's situation. I didn't answer him directly, but told him I had a feeling something wasn't right. That's when he told me what he knew. John had been involved in a large-scale tax evasion scheme. He had been hiding millions of dollars, moving money around to avoid paying taxes. I was shocked, but something inside me told me I needed to do something about it. I had spent years learning about the law, and now it was time to put it to use. I decided to investigate further. I couldn't let him get away with this. I started digging into John's finances, looking for any clues that might lead to something bigger. It wasn't easy, and I had to be careful. I knew John would try to cover his tracks, but as I dug deeper, I found a paper trail, a series of documents that pointed to tax evasion. It was the proof I needed, and I was ready to take action. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep this went. John wasn't just hiding money. He was part of a much larger network of criminals. There were other people involved, people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. I knew I had to be careful. The risks were high, but I couldn't back down now. This was my chance to finally bring him to justice. One evening, I made a decision. I would go to the authorities and report everything I had found. But I didn't go alone. Peter had been helping me gather information, and together we went to the prosecutor's office. I was nervous, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The prosecutor listened carefully as we presented the evidence, and he promised to look into it. Weeks passed, and I waited anxiously for any updates. Then, one day, I received a call. The case had been accepted, and an investigation was underway. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but I knew the battle wasn't over. John was a dangerous man, and he would stop at nothing to protect himself. He had connections, power, and money. But I had the truth on my side, and that was something he couldn't escape. The trial was set. The courtroom was filled with tension as my stepfather, John, sat across from me. He looked at me with contempt, but I wasn't afraid. This was my moment. I had spent years preparing for this day, and I wasn't going to let him get away with his crimes. The trial was long and grueling, but I stayed focused. I presented the evidence piece by piece until there was no denying his guilt. When the verdict came, I held my breath. John was convicted, and the sentence was harsh. He was going to prison for a long time. As the judge announced the verdict, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. It wasn't just about justice for the money he had stolen. It was about justice for my mother, for all the pain he had caused. John's reaction was predictable. He raged in the courtroom, shouting at me, accusing me of betrayal. But I didn't flinch. I had done what was right, and that was all that mattered. Years have passed since that day, and my life has changed in ways I never expected. I married Peter, who had been my rock through it all, and we started a family. My grandparents, who had always supported me, were overjoyed to see me happy. I couldn't have asked for a better life. But the memories of my past are always with me. I'll never forget the lessons I learned along the way. The importance of family, justice, and perseverance. And most of all, I'll never forget the strength it took to face my past and take down the man who had once been my stepfather. Now, as I sit here with my family, I reflect on how far I've come. I have a new purpose now, my children. I want to make sure they grow up with the love and support I didn't have. I don't want them to feel alone, the way I did. And no matter what happens, I'll make sure they know that love and justice always prevail in the end.